Everyone here in the West seems very uneducated about what's actually happening in Israel with the Israelis and the Palestinians and all the other Muslim countries just sitting back and watching it happen. So I'm going to go ahead and give you guys the actual truth of why it's happening, what's actually going on. Do not allow your social media-induced ADHD to make you skip past this video. This is an actual educational video that will help you for this situation and many other situations where you are being psyoped by the mainstream media, social media, and everybody else is talking about pro-Palestine, down with the Zionists. Here we go. You ready? So a long time ago, the one and only true living Lord God, who is Elohim, Yud-He-Vav-He, goes to a man called Abraham and says, I want you to leave your house, everything that you have, and I want you to go to a place where I'm going to show you. It's going to be called the Promised Land, and I'm going to give you this Promised Land. And then he sets out, God sets out, the borders and the area and the territory that Abraham is going to have as a permanent covenant. But Abraham is very old. He's like 99, and he doesn't have any sons to inherit his Promised Land that was given to him by God for the future generations. So he thinks, God hasn't given me a son. Maybe I'll make a son out of one of these peoples that live with me. And God says, no, you're not going to do that because I'm going to give you a son. Abraham gets anxious. He's waiting. The son doesn't appear. His wife Sarah doesn't get pregnant. So he says, what do I do now? He teams up with Sarah and hatches a very dumb plan to have one of his wife Sarah's handmaidens, Hagar, who is an Egyptian, to lay with Abraham so that he will have a son and so that he will have a bloodline that will continue to hold the Promised Land. Okay? But this is a mistake. And God tells him, you have committed a terrible error. And I will give you a real son of your wife, Sarah. And his name will be called Isaac. And he's the son of promise. This child that you have had with Hagar is not the son of promise. So, through situations there, tensions in the family, Sarah tells Abraham, it's her or me. It's Hagar or me, and you got to choose, and one of us is about to go. So God tells Elohim, God Almighty, tells Abraham to listen to Sarah and get rid of Hagar and her son. Abraham's very upset about this, but God says, don't worry, he's not going to die. I'm not going to send him out in the wilderness to perish. I'm going to make him into a great and mighty nation. He will have 12 sons, they'll be princes, and he will be great in the earth, right? Fast forward, okay? Isaac begets Jacob. And Jacob, after his trials and tribulations, is renamed by God Israel. And Israel, who is Jacob, has 12 sons who are 12 tribes, who eventually become 12 tribes. And those 12 tribes become the tribes of Israel, which become the nation of Israel, which is from the man Jacob, through Isaac, through Abraham. And God gave him the Promised Land, and that lineage is to have the Promised Land, the promise to be a God. But, backtrack, when Ishmael was sent out with the mother, and the mother was fearful, Hagar was like, I don't want to see the boy die. God saved them, and they went on to have a fruitful life. But she prayed out, and God answered and said, you're not going to die here. And she said, this is the God who sees. And from that came the colloquialism of Allah, which is a common word in your speech, and you say, oh, it just means Allah. It doesn't just mean Allah. Remember that. Continuing forward, and these became the Arabs that are of the world today, which have been, of the world of Jesus' time. And then it eventually became all the Muslims that are today. So, the Israelites have their storyline that you can read throughout the Holy Bible. And you can see this in the Old Testament via the prophets. The prophet, God sends a prophet to the nation of Israel and says, hey, this is how you're supposed to be conducting yourself, and here's a clue for the coming Messiah. Each prophet does that. That's their function. And then there is no more need for prophets because the Messiah appears, and it's Yeshua, Jesus Christ. And Jesus says, this is the new covenant. Because the Promised Land is kept for the Jews, it was kept in this fashion because via this bloodline of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob that led down to King David and Solomon that led to Christ, that's the only reason why this has happened through Abraham, that the Promised Land was kept so that Jesus could be here. That's why it was happening. So that old covenant remains forever, but I'm adding like a new covenant to it, Okay, so the old covenant for the Israelis still is there. And Jesus says, not a jot or a tittle from the law will fall away. And this covenant is forever. And the house of David shall stand forever. And Jesus says, now here's the new covenant on how everybody gets to heaven. It's no longer by animal sacrifices and hoping that the high priest doesn't get condemned by God in the Holy of Holies. Here's what it is. Everybody has sinned. Nobody can do any good works that reach God to get them saved from their sins. There's no way you can buy back your purity. Okay, once you lose your spiritual virginity, via sin, you can't never get it back. The same way you can't ever get your mortal virginity, your physical virginity back. You can never get it back again, okay? So the only way that this is going to work is if a holy sacrifice from heaven comes down, pays for the debt in your place through a holy sacrifice, and the blood is spilt on the altar that is holy blood, because we know that the blood of the Father, via science, we understand that the blood of the baby comes from the Father. So Jesus being of a virgin birth, the blood of the Holy Spirit and Elohim Almighty came through Jesus, was spilt on the altar through the crack in the stone that led down to the Ark of the Covenant. And you research all this stuff yourself. And this is how you get to heaven now. So there is no more need for prophets. The Messiah, the King, showed up and said how it was going to be from now on. 600 years later, an Arab who was an Ishmaelite discovered, I am of Ishmael's descendants. I'm Ishmael's descendants. And he sees the Jews, and he's very hateful against them. And it says of Ishmael that his hand will be against every man, because he's a wild man, and every man's hand will be against him. But he will have 12 princes, and he will have a great and mighty nation. That's what you see with all these Muslim countries. So, a merchant, he was a very small merchant, gaining power and influence. Sadly, he was a pedophile, and he was a warlord. This is not me attacking Muhammad. These are actual facts. He married a 6-year-old, consummated the marriage at 9. 9 years old. He was like 53 or something. That's a pedophile. He was a warlord that ended like 600 Jews in one day. So what he does is he realizes he's from Ishmael, so he takes the Holy Bible, Old Testament and New, takes the key parts of faith out of there, puts it on his own pieces of paper, and adds his own things about being a warlord, that his bloodline is what should have the promised land, that he should set up a worldwide caliphate, having sex slaves and more slaves, and committing atrocities, and it doesn't matter how you defeat your enemies, as long as you defeat them. Now we can actually talk about what's going on today in Israel. So for everyone that's saying that this is a racial war, or this is some kind of, terrible thing that's happening to a different set of people, no, this is a family feud. If you actually know the history of it, it's a family feud. So we go back a little bit, and we realize that the Israelites, who are only Jews, have the majority of Israel, which is actually Judea, under control, but through Roman occupation and many other kind of wars and tribulations that happened there, what happens is called the diaspora. And the majority of the Jews is spread throughout the earth. And over time, they are hated in many different countries because there's a supernatural hate for the chosen people of Elohim. And they are super persecuted most of the places where they are. So after the Holocaust, they say, we're done with all this, we're going back to Israel, our original homeland that was given to us by God. So they head back. The land is mostly made desolate in this time that they were gone. And there are some Arabians who are Ishmaelites who have become Muslims over time, who have filled the land a little bit, and they're living there. And so when the Jews start to come in the 1940s and a little bit before that, and they're recognized as, this is our nation, this is what God wrote in the Bible as the parameters of our territory and land, okay? We've come back to settle the land. They didn't colonize, they're just taking their home back. Just like if the natives were gone for a long time, and then they came back, this is the Native American lands. This is their land, okay? This is not white American man's land. This is Native Americans' land. So if they were to take over the whole area, there wouldn't be a problem for anybody. I mean, in reality, it's their land. So the Israelites start taking over their land. And they're not violent, they're not crazy about it, they're just slowly taking over the areas where the other people were not. And the other people are like, oh my God, this is so terrible because we follow the pedophilic warlord Muhammad who said that this is our land via Ishmael. But no, it's not. It's not. Because 600 years after the Holy Bible was done being written, where all the promises and everything were in it, then came Muhammad with his manipulations, and the Quran is actually just a manipulated Bible. That's all it is. So, they start going at odds with each other. And because they're more fanatical and following in what you call the Sharia law. So they go extra mental. They're like way hardcore. And they're like, rah, Allah Akbar. But it's not Allah Akbar, because it's just a colloquialism of the God who sees, which is Elohim. Which Elohim vacated them. Like, yo, bro, you're not a part of this, this lineage that's going to the promised land. This is not your promised land. You're going to have your own nation somewhere else, which are the Muslim countries today. So the people that are there are slowly moved down to their areas in the north and in the south. And then they create this area called Palestine, but really it's just another part of Judea. That's all it is. The whole area is called Judea. And Israel comes along many different times and says, okay, you know what, let's just have peace, bro. Two-state solution. And because they're so mental and hell-bound on a worldwide caliphate, and them being lied to by the pedophilic warlord called Muhammad, saying that their bloodline is the actual one that was promised the entire area of the Canaanites, which was taken as the promised land, which is called Judea. No, because this is our bloodline and our family feud, our side of the family, this is our land. So they go extra crazy. And no matter how many times Israel sues for peace and tries to give them a two-state solution, they stay in their area and continue going mental, shooting rockets. So they have a condensed area called Palestine and Gaza. And that Asher Arafat, or whatever his name is, Arafat, is like, no, we're not having it. We're not having peace. And there'll never be peace until all the Jews are eradicated and we have the entire land. But the Israelites are like, bro, just chill. Calm down, bro. Have your own area. Have your area there. You know, Palestine, what do you call Palestine, which is really just our land, Judea? Just keep it. Keep it. We'll leave. 2005, we left the whole area. Keep it, dude. Guess what happened? A new terrorist organization from the other Muslim countries comes in and says, hey guys, guess what? We're Hamas, we're taking over, we're going to end everybody that opposes us, and you guys are under our control now. So all of your resources will be funneled through us, and we're going to take the majority of it as freedom fighters, really freedom fighters, and we're going to go and shoot rockets all the time from population centers where all the civilians, hospitals and schools and, residential areas that are real compact. That's where we're going to set up our bases, and that's where we're going to shoot our rockets from into Israel. So when they attack, and they have retaliation to try to stop us, Hamas, the terrorists, don't worry, guys. A bunch of you civilians are going to be blown up so that the world can be on our side, the terrorist side, Hamas, and be like, oh God, look how terrible it is that we hit amongst the civilians and then the civilians died with us. It's so terrible. That's the psyop that they're doing to everybody. Then they'll say, oh my God, it's such an open-air prison. It's an open-air prison. Oh my God, you know how I would feel if I was in there and if I was in Gaza? You can leave anytime. You can enter Israel almost at any time as long as you don't have, weapons that will harm other people. As long as you're not a crazy lunatic, you can actually go into Israel. Guess who can't go through that border? The Israelites and the Gaza, because you know what will happen? Yeah, that's what will happen. Because they indoctrinate their children to want to annihilate every single Jew. And the majority of their cartoons are to say, oh my God, how it's so terrible, these Jews. And they have their cartoon characters being executed by the bad cartoon characters who are the Israelites. And they indoctrinate their children like that. And so the whole population grows up in this indoctrination, being run by Hamas and the other terrorist organizations that are solely Muslim, from the other Muslim countries, being funded by Iran and every one of those. And they say, guess what, guys? You're going to continue being the fodder that gets just annihilated. So when you see the kids throwing the rocks at the tanks, that's because of indoctrination by the Muslims. And it's absolutely not a prison, because at any time, all they have to do is go to another Muslim country, because those are the Arab brothers that they should be going to. If they feel like, boy, I don't want to be wiped out, because these Israeli soldiers are defending their homeland from the rockets that these moron Hamases are shooting into their area from our populated civilian areas. I don't want to be a part of this anymore. I don't want a family to die. We should get the hell out of here. But no, they don't. They don't, because they've been indoctrinated to believe that Allah Akbar. That doesn't say God is great. That says their God is the greatest. Their false Allah is better than Elohim. Yud-He-Vav-He, which is the Jews' God. That's what it's about. The family war, it's a religious war. Has nothing to do with civilians and all. It has to do, well, it does have to do with civilians. I'm saying it doesn't have to do with racist people in the open air prison. This is all a lie. They can leave at any time and go to any other Muslim country. At any time, they can leave. The civilians can leave, and the Hamas will stay there. And the reason why Israel is going in there is to wipe out Hamas. That's why they have the ground game going on now, to wipe out Hamas. They're not trying to harm the civilians. So anybody that's saying free Palestine, they are free. They can leave at any time. Or they can leave for a time and come back when Hamas is dealt with, and a real government that's for them, that will benefit them, is put into place. Until then, it's going to continue this cycle the way it is. And the reason why the other Muslim countries won't accept the Palestinians or do anything against the Palestinians is because they're waiting for the mainstream media to be like, oh my God, the civilian deaths are so terrible, so that they have to eventually all stand up with one accord and say, we're all going to go to war against Israel, wipe out the Jews, and have our homeland back. That's all it's about, bro. Anybody who tells you anything different, they're lying to you. That's reality.